my name is Elisa and welcome to my channel Thrills and Stitches. If you've been here before, you know what I'm all about. I'm creating my dream wardrobe from scratch and I'm taking you along for the ride so maybe you can recreate some of the pieces that I make at home. This week I delved into something that I've actually never done before, and that was working with imitation leather. I made this pinafore that I'm wearing right now that you saw in the intro, and I think it turned out a really fun and cool and versatile piece. I think it's a cool piece for winter or fall time. You can wear it with any sort of jumper or blouse and works well underneath the coat. So yeah, that's why I made it. I saw this design initially on a street style look, but the look itself is from Prada. It's a ready-to-wear runway look. And yeah, I was really enchanted by the simple design. I really like this like plunging U in the front and in the back. And it's a lined dress, it's a mini dress, it's a fun dress, and I don't think there's much more I have to say about it except show you how I made it. So let's get into it.
As you've already seen me do in the last few videos, I'll be working with a bodice sloper and start from there. I'll link the tutorial I used to create it in the description box. The pattern is fairly simple as the dress consists of an A-line skirt with two deep curves in the front and back and no darts. The front is held together by a narrow strap or belt. These are the measurements I ended up with. Feel free to pause the video to have a closer look. Keep in mind that this is based on my size and height, so you might want to make some changes to this. Once I had a pattern for the front of the dress I was happy with, I used that to create the pattern of the back. After that, I cut out my pieces.
What you will need for the sewing process is a couple of scissors. I'm using these for paper and I'm using these for fabric. So I cut the leather with these ones and I cut the lining with these ones. You will also need some pins, although I will have to see how the leather reacts to the pins because there will be holes that you will be able to see later, so it's very important to keep that in mind. You will also need a measuring tape, maybe some chalk or another kind of fabric pen. You will also need some leather machine needles. I just bought these recently. They are just more durable and more stable than normal machine needles, so you can be sure that they're not breaking on you all the time. You will obviously also need some thread in the matching color. I use Gutermann a lot because it's a very good brand and I can be sure that the thread is not snapping. Before I actually start the sewing process, I'm gonna grab myself some scrap leather and I'm going to put the needles in my machine and give it some test stitches to see how it behaves. So I'm now going to close my center back seam and I'm just going to place a couple needles in the seam allowance to make sure this is not moving around too much.
Place back in front of the dress right sides touching, means the outer side of the fabric facing each other. I placed as few pins as possible on the outermost corner of the seam allowance to avoid any visible pricks in the imitation leather. I was surprised by the handling of the material, although I did notice it deteriorate quite quickly when worked through the machine too often, so be careful if you use something similar.
It's not that far off, is it? Alright you guys, as you can see there's a bunch of collateral already on the floor, and that is because I already made a few changes to this and it looks quite good. It already looks like a pinafore and I like it. I shortened it, I made it smaller in the sides, I opened the armholes, and now what I'm thinking is, apart from opening the armholes some more, I'm going to add a seam in the center front, and that is because that allows me to cinch it in even a little bit more here. But also I have this pleat here from the fold and I cannot obviously iron this fabric. So in order to make this look nice, I'm gonna replace this fold with a seam, and that's also gonna help me make the alteration so it fits me perfectly. So it's up next. Good morning, guys. It is 8 o'clock in the morning. I am determined to sit down and sew a little bit further on this dress. It's been a week since the last time that I worked on the dress, so I didn't really get to sew, but I decided to take small steps and start working on the dress again this morning. I think it's important to know that, you know, I'm not always sitting down with a piece and then, you know, sewing it straight up into a dress. It sometimes takes several steps and several moments, and sometimes it happens over several weeks, and this is one of those projects. So don't be too harsh on yourself if you're not able to finish the thing in one go. It's fine, you know, it's fine. So let's finish this thing up. Okay, so we have the dress here, and I decided that I want to line the dress, which means I had to buy some lining in the right color, which is this. I made sure to buy enough so I have enough fold, because I'm gonna cut the pieces on the fold so I don't have a seam in the center front or the center back. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place the dress onto the lining so that it allows me to trace around it in some way, shape or form. So I need some chalk as well. So this is the front and this is the back, as you can maybe see. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trace around the piece, but I'm not going to add seam allowance. And that is because when I line up the lining with the actual edge of the shell fabric, it's going to pull the shell inside the piece and allow it to not show from the outside, which is exactly what you want. You don't want to see the lining on the outside, right? So when the lining is cut a little bit smaller, it's going to pull the edge of the shell into itself and give you a clean edge. The only thing that I need to make sure is that I do give myself some seam allowance at the side seams, where I'm gonna sew the front and the back pieces together. Okay, so the plan is to start with the front piece, place the right side of the lining onto the right side of the shell, and then carefully, just on the very edge of the piece, pin them together. It should fit perfectly, as you can see here, so it's gonna be quite easy to do that. And we're gonna do the same thing on the edge of the armhole, pinning our lining onto the shell. We're now gonna sew all the way around here, and then the armholes. So now what we can do is to turn the straps inside out and overturn them. So we have beautifully lined straps here and armhole. And that's the front piece. Now we do the same thing for the back piece. Okay, so now I have sewn the back. I'm going to nip the seam allowance, especially in the curves, making sure I'm not cutting through my seams. So when I turn everything around, it has an easier time and it's not going to warp. I did the same thing in the front. And now turning it inside out, or outside out, I guess. Okay, so now these are lined as well. And what I'm going to do next is to grab the two lining pieces front and back, aligning the side seams, placing a few needles so we can close the side seams. Okay, so now that we have lined the dress, we need to focus on the finishing touches around the neckline and the back, and then joining the shoulders together. So because this is obviously a synthetic material, I cannot press it because it would melt underneath my iron. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch down the edges like I did with the side seams and the center front, center back seams, so that everything is gonna lie flat and is not like this like little tube shape. And also we have a nice crisp line around the neck and the back. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm going to leave my stitch at 3.5 to give it a nice clean look, because I don't want the stitches to be too small. And this is probably going to ask for a lot of precision to make it look nice. So wish me luck, because I could mess everything up at this point in time, but I'm gonna try my best. Okay, we are in the final stretch. As you can see, I top stitched all of the edges to understitch the lining. Now there is one problem that I probably cannot fix, and that is that the front and back straps don't match up. Like they're not the same width, as you can see here. I don't think I can fix that. It's a shame, but it's also not the end of the world. Now the other thing that has arisen, which I'm unsure about, is I already made this belt-like thing here, which is gonna go across the chest here to hold the whole thing together. Now in the original Prada look, this is way thinner. It's about half that. I don't know if that makes sense. Half the width of this belt. So now my issue is, do I use this one, which is quite massive, or do I cut this up and make it more narrow? A decision has been made. I'm gonna make this more narrow. Okay, so I narrowed this belt-like thing for the bust, and I completely messed it up. I tried to close this area and this didn't work at all. It looks messy, obviously, as you can see. It didn't turn in, so I will have to redo this. And I only have one more try, because for some reason I threw away my leather scrap pieces. I never do this. I don't know why I did it. I guess I just didn't pay attention, so I threw my scraps away, although I would now need them. But I still have one more try. I have the leather piece and I have the lining piece, so wish me luck. I did cut this minimally smaller now, the lining, in the hope that it's going to pull the leather in, so to speak. And I'm not going to have to top stitch the corners, because that would make it a lot cleaner looking. And I'm just gonna press this overnight in the hopes that it's going to lie flat. This looks really super neat. I'm actually really pleased with how this turned out. I placed my jewelry box on it for a while and it actually already changed the shape of it. It's not completely flat, but I guess that's fine. It's gonna do that after a while of wearing it, I assume. So what I'm gonna do now, because this end is open so I could overturn it, I'm gonna overlock this edge and then I'm going to hide it underneath this corner. So I'm gonna move that in here and then have a button on this side and just make it one button on one side. I think that looks cool. How unlikely is it that you find the one hand sewing needle in a stack of pins in a few seconds? You saw me just do it. I'm going to hand sew this strap onto the dress because there are too many layers of fake leather and I don't want to break anything on my machine.
I went to buy some buttons for the finishing touches, but ended up using only one of them. I'm really pleased with the color match here. I made sure the bust strap was even on the dress and secured the button with 2 dressmaking pins before sewing it on by hand. To prep for closing the hem of the dress, I cut the lining back by about 1.5 centimeters. I had a bit of a tugging issue in the end, so it would have been better to only cut it back by 0.5.
So the way this should ideally work is I'm grabbing my shell, I'm grabbing my lining, and then I'm folding the two towards each other like so, and then I'm grabbing them like this so that we have the seam allowance on the inside and the nice seam on the outside. And then ideally I should be able to sew around it as far as I can, and then the rest I'm going to close by hand. So once I have placed my first securing needle here, I can then start to continue. And obviously this is a bit like convoluted looking. I'm just going to trust the process, knowing that I've placed the first needle in the right way. So when I follow the edge, everything should be fine.
I top stitched the hem to give it the same look as the rest of the seams, and with that, the dress was finished. Time for the final reveal.
It's no use working 9 to 5 if you want more than to stay alive. So come on over, we can make it through. Take my hand, I know just what to do. On the beat, keep dancing through the night. Stay up until the morning light, the morning light. Oh, so come on over, we can make it through.
Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the final look. I sure do. I think it's really cool. I like this dress. And something cool that my boyfriend also said was that, you know, you can't tell that this is self-made, which is always what I'm aiming for. So I hope you have fun making it for yourself. And just a quick call out thank you to everyone who's already subscribed to my channel. Thank you so much for watching my videos. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Click that button, please. Thank you. See you next time.